Hey, welcome back. And we are in the inception review. So, coming back to where I left off, I was talking specifically about when I was a child, that automatically at around about 14, I knew how to do visual stories in my head, that anytime my space was empty, meaning I was at stasis, I was relaxing, I was what have you, I had trained my brain to go back to these pulling the characters from this TV show and creating my own world in my mind. Okay? And after I stopped watching the show and stopped dealing with those kinds of things in my early. Yeah, it was early. Like between 20 and 21, I stopped doing that. And I actually had to force my brain to stop doing that. I had to turn that switch off. And I was able to do that. I don't know whether I prayed it away or what it was, but I was no longer going into long form vision stories in my mind. Why did I tell you this? It's another form of creation. Okay? So he was talking to her, and after she came out of the dream, she was like, "Oh my God, what in the world was that?" He's like, "That was the dream realm. And I needed you to see it. Now that you see it and you have a little bit of understanding to the feeling of it, we're going to go back in for another 5 minutes." She said, 5 minutes? It's like, that felt like it was at least, and it was a long time. He said, no. 5 minutes in a dream is the equivalent of 1 hour. Okay? And he said, we're going to go back in and I'm going to now show you the lay of the land. She was like, okay. He's like, are you ready? She ended up going back in. Now they're walking down the street and he's showing her the street and all of this. She's like, well, where are we? Why are we here? He said, this is my dream. She's like, okay. And she's like, and who are all the people? He said, projections, fabrications of my mind to set the scene. I am the dreamer, but you are the architect. Now let's see what you can do. So he says she has the ability to impact that world in any way that she wants to. So she's like, okay. So she actually starts to think about how she wants to impact the world. Like an artist painting a picture. You make adjustments. So she's like, what would it look like if I did this? So she starts to focus on the other half of the street in Paris. It's a building, it's all of these kinds of things on the opposite end. And then you start to see it bend up and begin to fold over on top and above them. And they kept walking. And he was like, wow. And they literally were looking at the mirror of where they were walking above them. They kept walking till they got to where it bent at and started to walk up the wall. And as their angle changed, so did their ability to adjust, meaning gravity did not exist. As she walked up the wall, she adjusted to the gravity of that place that was straight in front of her. She was walking up it. They both were walking up it, but it adjusted as if they were on a flat plane. Why am I thinking of this scripture that God will make your mountains into plains? So they walked up and they kept going, and he took her to a street. And when he took her to this street, he said that you can change the atmosphere. So they walked up this ramp and walked down the other side. They got to this archway. She turned and looked at one side of the archway, and you realized it was a mirror there. She touched the mirror, pushing it so that it was then facing the opposite end. Then she went and pulled the mirror from the opposite side and pulled that in, so it created two reflective planes. And as you know, with a mirror, physics, science, if you take two mirrors and put them up to each other, what does it create? A long hallway type experience. You know, you've seen it anytime you had your phone or a mirror or a reflective surface, and you put it up to the mirror. It became a long hallway. So that's what happened. She faced the two mirrors to each other, then broke them. When she broke them, it turned into a street. And they started walking. He said, good. But as they were walking, he started to have a memory of him and Maul on a specific bridge or in a specific area. He said, what is this? She said, oh, it's a bridge I pass every day. He said, don't do that. Let me back you up. Remember what I was saying about I used to create in my mind when I was like 14 through 21. I used to create visions in my stasis time, meaning I would envision what I wanted to see because I was bored. And I would always go into that TV show whenever I was bored. It was my happy place. It was my safe space. It was whatever. So what ended up happening is, I actually don't think I did it till I was 21. I think I did it till I was 18, 17. About 3-4 years. Whatever. Period. But I may have been 21 because I was still writing fiction for that back during the time frame. But that his warning to her was this: do not create places that are familiar to you in the waking world. She said, why not? Because you will begin to not be able to decipher reality from your dreams. Think about it. I used to do that TV show as my escape space for my mind to go, right? But I knew if I'm seeing those people, I'm not in reality. That's my differentiation. But think about it like this. Let's say you do a head story where you go into that reality and It's your everyday life, but you're changing it. You telling a story in your head about the life that you want to live, not the life that you are living. And at any particular point in time, pulling spaces, places, people, and associations that you want in your life into that space. And you stay there too long. This is an actual thing because there are people that cannot handle their reality, and they will trap themselves mentally into their mind. You can research it. I don't know what they call it. This is what makes that meta so dangerous. Because if they get that VR technology correct, when will people leave that world? Especially if they can create it themselves. Think about that. And it's as real as your everyday life. Now, as far as right now, in the beta that they got, it looks like a cartoon world, so maybe you might be able to escape that thing. But there's a danger there. There's a real danger there. Think about how they created The Sims. You could sit in there and play that for hours and not realize how many hours you took, creating another reality with all the people that you know. And the realism and realisticness of the characters is getting realer and realer and realer. It would not surprise me if they get to a point where the version of it is going to be put on, what they call it, Next Gen 5 engine that looks real. It would not surprise me. And then integrate it with that metaverse. Jesus, don't let that happen. I think you understand what I'm trying to say. I think you do. Let's return to the dream. The movie, which is the dream scene. But she's doing the architecture, and he's explaining to her, you can't do that. You can't create something that is something that already exists, because it'll make it hard for you to decipher reality from the dream. And she also points out, she's like, why are these people showing up now? He said, because they realize that you are altering the reality. And they are immediately coming to see and to defend my mind. And then you see the groups of people start to come in, and it becomes too much, and they're moshing up against each other. And then right straight smack dab in the middle, you see Maul coming straight for her, and they are holding him back. And then she gets stabbed, and she wakes up, and she's like, what the heck was that? What was that? What was that? And she starts screaming at Cobbs like, your wife is something or other. And Arthur says, oh, you met Miss Eve. And he goes into the other room. He's having himself a panic attack. And he goes and he spins the weighted, what you call it? It's a weighted spinning top. The weighted spinning top thing. And when he realizes that it tips over, he knows that he's no longer in the dream. He uses that as his tell to let himself know, okay, I'm not in the dream. Okay, I'm not in the dream. I'm good. So, that being said, she freaking out, and they calm her down, and she's like, you got yourself something going on, because you got something, I can't be dealing with that. She jumps up and she leaves. And he said, don't worry about it, she'll be back, because she already experienced it, and because she experienced it, her curiosity is gonna bring her back. And Arthur said, what you gonna do now? He said, I need to go find me a thief. He said, you going after, I forget what his name was. And he said, I need him because he's not just a thief, but he's a forger. It's like, okay, you do that. So he leaves, and you see, and before he leaves, Arthur says, are you sure you want to go there? Because you know what's going on. And he's like, I know it's dangerous, but I have no choice. I need that guy. So he goes to Mumbai. When he gets to Mumbai, he manages to find who he's looking for, literally messing up a game of poker. He takes the chips back to the deck people to cash them in, and he said, you still forging stuff? And he points out, I think that the chips were forged or something like that. And he said, what do you need? He said, let's go talk. So they go and sit, and it's a beautiful vantage point that they're sitting and watching the view and drinking some beers inside this little small cafe place. He said, I need your help. He said, what you doing? He said, I need to do an inception. A lot of people say it's impossible. He said, oh no, it's not impossible. It's just extremely difficult. What do you need to do? He said, I need to implant a thought in this rich kid's brain before his father dies. And he's like, what's the issue between the two of them? And he's like, I'm not quite sure. He's like, all right, this is what we're going to do. We got to find out what that issue is. So while they're talking, he said he sees the guy at the desk, and he's like, I got a tail on me. He's like, I need to continue talking to you, but I can't right now. He's like, you want to meet in half an hour? He's like, good. He jumps over the balcony while the other guy distracts the guy that's tailing him. And he's like, oh, you weren't. And that guy go running, but down on the ground after he lands, he takes off running. It's a chase scene. He goes and hides, so on and so forth. What ends up happening is, I don't know how Mr. Sato knew, but Mr. Sato's car pulls up, knocks the guy that was just about to come at him out with the car door, and said, would you like to get in? He's like, how'd you get here? He said, I protects my investments, bro. They get in and they take off riding. So, they meet his friend who was standing in the alley waiting for him. And then they get in. He's like, I need to meet the chemist now. So they go and they stop at this little alleyway place. And there's this guy, they go inside, and he's at the bar. And at least it looks like a bar. But all of these are chemical compounds. He said, I need you to create a sedative. And he's like, what are you trying to do? He's like, I need to create a dream. And he's like, oh, you need it in order for you to go into the dream. He's like, well, how deep you trying to go? 2 levels deep? He's like, no, I'm trying to go 3. He's like, 3? That's dangerous. And that's going to take a very specific type of sedative in order for you to get that deep in the mind. It's like, I'm going to show you something. And Sato finally makes his point. He's like, I'm going with y'all. He's like, you can't go with us, because if you go with us, he's like, I want to protect my investment. I'm going with y'all when y'all go. And he's like, it could be detrimental if it's too many people in your dream, especially if you don't know what you're doing. He's like, I want to protect my investment. He's like, okay. And they all go down to go check and see what this guy wants to show them. It's 12 people hooked up to one apparatus that's feeding them the sedative in order to keep them sleeping. And he says, what is this? He's like, it's a continual sedative. He's like, well, how long do the people sleep? These people want to dream and escape their reality for at least 4 hours a day. And he's like, 4 hours? Anywhere from 3 to 4 hours. If 5 minutes is 1 hour, the equivalent of that is actually 48 hours. And he's like, well, that's ridiculous. And he's like, yeah, 48 hours. And he like, a guy walks up to them and says, they don't come here to go to sleep. They come here to be woken up. Can you imagine going into your dreams and being stuck in your dream for 48 hours? I'm going to tell you something that happened to me. I don't repeat this often. I don't think I've ever said it publicly. There was one time, and this can happen to people, I wasn't getting enough sleep. I wasn't. I was constantly working on stuff. And sometimes your body needs a shutdown. And I was doing what I normally do. It was 2 o'clock in the morning one day. And I'm figuring, okay, I'll get up at whatever time, right? I normally wake up around about 11 anyway. I go to sleep around about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I'm figuring, I'd be up at 11. To me, it felt like I just went to sleep. But a person that lived in the house that I was living in at the time called my name and said, you gonna get up? I was like, and I'm thinking they calling me about 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. She's like, at 7 o'clock, aren't you gonna get up? Now I'm thinking, you calling me at 7 o'clock in the morning. What in the world is you doing? I pick up my phone. It's 7 p.m. Calculate that. 2 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock at night. And had she not called me, I don't know when I would have woke up. I don't know why that happened. Has it ever happened since? Nope. That was the last time it happened, and it has not happened since. So understand how the depth it takes to go into the dream realm. 14 hours, 16 hours. And at that time, I don't even recall I dreamt that night, because I remember that I went to sleep and the next thing I remembered was her calling me, which means I saw nothing in my sleep. So can you imagine somebody going to sleep for 48 hours? Or feeling like they were sleeping for 48 hours? If the mind was not active, that's different. But what if the mind was? I'm going to hold off on the next thing I'm going to say. I'm going to tell you something else that happened. It didn't happen to me. Well, actually, it did, now that I'm thinking about it. And what I just said, that happened almost 10 years ago. Okay? And actually, was that before I became a Christian? Yeah, it was right before I gave my life to Christ. Matter of fact, it was one of the reasons why I did. Because I never wanted to experience something like that again. It scared me. It scared me. What happened next? So the chemist said, let me try it. So he tested the drug on Cobb, because Cobb wanted to try the drug. And he got down and he laid on one of the beds and they gave him the drug. He wasn't under for very long. Like a few natural minutes, which was only seconds. He may have been under for maybe a minute, and he had a few visions of mall and a train track. You're like, okay. He comes out, he wakes up, he goes in the bathroom, has himself another panic attack. He goes, washes his face, and spins the top, but before it can stop, Sato comes back there and says, you okay? He's like, yeah, I'm alright. And then he looks down at the floor and sees that the top did stop spinning. And they make the determination as to what their next move's gonna be. So they go outside and they go to the rooftop and they all sit down and talk about, so what we gonna do? So he's like, who's the target? And they express who the target is. They talk about the young man, and they talk about his fortune, the fact that he's the one that's going to inherit his father's company, which is Sato's company's enemy, and they want to incept the thought process that he will divest all his assets, more than likely, so Sato can buy them. Pretty much. And they need to put a thought in his mind to make him do it. And they're like, well, we just can't drop in the thought. That's going to be forced. It's like, we need to create a scenario that tells his subconscious that he's had thoughts from his childhood due to something that happened between him and his father in relation to their relationship. And this is what the forger is talking about. And this is what I believe his characteristic is. He forges the thought process. Not to mention, he can manipulate images, meaning he can masquerade. You'll find that out deeper in when they go in the dream. So, what they do is they have him go in and find out some information. I don't know whether he does this through a dream or what he does, but you see him go visit this guy. And he comes in as the assistant to the lawyer that works for the family. And he's just sitting there watching. And as he's watching, he's observing how the young man interacts with his uncle, and how he interacts with his father, as his father is in a state of preparing to die. And even how the father fusses out and cusses him out. And he saw the photo that fell on the ground and broke. And he just so happened that the door was open and he heard the conversation between the uncle and him. So that is how he knew he needed to use to get close. Now remember what I just said. Did I say it in this video? I think I said it in the previous video. Go back and look at the previous one where I explain how the masquerading spirit works. If you have not seen that part, go back and look. I do a more in-depth understanding of how people can masquerade. So the forger goes and starts to practice mannerisms in the mirror. Now, here's the thing I couldn't understand. He was looking in the mirror, but in the mirror, he was already taking on the characteristics and mannerisms of the uncle. Not to mention he looked like him in the mirror, unless he went into a dream state or something. I don't know what he did in order to be able to do that, because you can't do it naturally. He couldn't do it in reality, so he had to have been in a dream state. That scene didn't quite make no sense to me. But this is how the masquerading spirit works. It creates the forger, the thief, takes his persona, fits himself into the persona of the man, walks, talks, acts, what have you. And he does it to a degree that as a forger, you could not tell the difference from him and the person he was masquerading as. I'm going to pause on that for a second. We'll be back in the next part. See you soon.